distinguished guests, dear compatriots and friends, on behalf of PARIKIAKI and NEPOMAK, I would like to welcome you all at tonight's lecture on economy. I would also like to apologize for postponing, due to the snow, the previous lecture on economy that was meant to take place on the 1st of December 2010. Unfortunately, due to work commitments, we haven't got with us tonight Mr. Kyriakos Tsipras and Mr. Philip Beresford, but we do have two distinguished speakers. Councillor Stephen Alambridis, leader of Merton Castle, the only Cypriot, leader of a castle, and former head of public affairs at the Federation of Small Businesses, and Mr. Andy Panagiotou, property developer and owner of the Ability Group. I thank them very much for accepting our invitation to talk to us about a topic we believe that they are experts in and very familiar with the current situation. But before I go any further, I would like to also thank the Cypriot Community Center for their hospitality, the Chair Suzy Konstantinidis and the Management Committee. We also extend our thanks to you all for being here with us tonight. Britain, as you know, is facing one of the worst economic crises since the Great Depression of the 1930s. The coalition government's emergency budget in June 2010, the spending review in October, and last week's budget amounted pressures on the ordinary working individuals and, of course, in many businesses. We already had problems with the fact that petrol prices have risen and the increase in VAT from 17.5% to 20% have pushed the production cost up. That's a subsequent rise in inflation. And to make matters worse, we don't know yet the full extent of the Libyan war and the unrest in the Arab world. To combat inflation, the cost of borrowing has gone up, resulting in more and more people losing their homes and more companies going under. That will create an unprecedented chain reaction for the worse. Since the beginning of the Cypriot migration in this country in the early 1930s, we have gone from strength to strength, from being kitchen porters and machinist-stroke finishers in dress factories to restaurant owners, hoteliers, entrepreneurs, fashion tycoons, and property developers. Happy to say that the second and third generation have surpassed all expectation with careers in politics and professional services, working as accountants, doctors, solicitors, architects, barristers, bankers, and stockbrokers. All the above achievements have been distributed wealth to the whole community and to Cyprus with various investments or buy for holiday homes. Obviously, our own community newspaper, PARIKIAKI, is very much concerned about the community with this current economic climate. Ever since our first publication back in September 1974, one of our main objectives was the welfare of our community. That is why from time to time we organize events like this with experts to enlighten the community about possible action that can be taken to ease the pressure, whether you are a business or an employee. We believe in mixed economy and we do encourage private businesses, but with a human face, complying with People's Charter, workers' rights and equal opportunities. Enough said. I will leave the experts to talk about the economy. But once again, I would like to thank everyone present, especially the two speakers, Councillor Stephen Alambridis and Mr. Andreas Panagiotou. I would like now to hand you over to the evening chair, CHRISTOS KARAOLIS, the president of NEPOMAK worldwide. Please, Christos, come in.
As Pampos said, we're very fortunate this evening to have two very prominent Cypriot businessmen with us to share their perspectives on how you can succeed in the current economic climate. Stephen Alambritis and Andreas Panagiotou. Now, Andreas is chairman of the Ability Group, one of the UK's largest property developing companies. Originally wanting to become a professional boxer, Andrea began his property development career in the East End of London. However, before the recession struck, he saw that the property market was turning and successfully refocused his group away from residential lending towards building five-star hotels. So he's very well placed to tell us how you can adapt and succeed in tough economic times. Stephen Alambritis is the leader of Merton Council and the former head of public affairs for the 215,000 member-strong Federation of Small Businesses. Now, Stephen has also taken a very active role advising governments on business regulation as a member of the Cabinet Office Better Regulation Task Force and chairman of Enterprise Insight. So with Stephen's background, he's ideally placed to tell us how government policy is going to be impacting business in the years to come. You're both very welcome. Our guest speakers this evening will be led by Stephen, who will give a short address, and then we'll open up the floor to questions and answers, and Andrea will be answering any questions you have alongside Stephen.
We are indeed blessed with entrepreneurs from our beloved country. Today I was with Steph Stefanou, chairman of John Doyle Group, a huge construction company. In the London Borough of Merton, where I lead, I have headquartered there Ryman's, which is led by Theo Perfidis. And obviously we have Stelios Hagianou. There may be something in the budget he's not happy about. That's to do with private jets, and I'll come on to that later. So we are indeed blessed, and we're very, very lucky, and I am immensely proud whenever I hear, read, listen to Andreas Panagiotou and what he has achieved from I think it's a dry cleaners that he took over from his parents, and we all owe a huge debt of gratitude, as always, to our parents. So we are blessed with Greek entrepreneurs, but are we blessed with George Osborne? What I want to do is to go through some of the highlights of the budget that Mr. Osborne delivered to the House of Commons on March the 23rd. What he said his aim was to fuel the UK economy. That was a pun because he was going to do something about the price of fuel. So he cut fuel duty by 1p per litre at 6 o'clock that evening, 23rd of March, and there was a planned rise of another 5p per litre in April of this year, and he has delayed that until 2012. Now that's going to cost him and the government £2 billion, and so he has to find that money from somewhere, and he's found that money by imposing an extra tax on the North Sea oil firms. And the accusation from the opposition, from Ed Balls and Ed Miliband, was that those companies would simply add to their prices and it would filter through to us when we're buying our petrol for our cars, for our business, social, or whatever. But the companies have not said that, but what they may do is offload labour, which would be bad for the economy. But nevertheless, the cuts in fuel duty were welcomed by the vast majority of people. To keep the Liberal Democrats happy, and he has to do that regularly because they're always on his back, he's increasing the personal tax allowance. This is the sum of money you and I can earn before we pay tax. And Nick Clegg wants that to be £10,000. It's currently, it was 6,500, it's going up to 7,500, it's going to go up to 8,000, and Nick Clegg wants that to be 10,000. So everyone can earn up to £10,000 and not pay any tax. And I think that is a laudable aim. He's also going to combine tax and national insurance. basic tax rate 20%, high rate tax rate 40%, but we also pay national insurance at around 11–12%. And that's two separate taxes. He wants to make them into one, and that'll show the real tax rate that we're all paying. On the 50p tax rate, that is going to stay, but George Osborne will review it to see how much money is coming in, because the natural instincts of the Conservative Party are that tax is low, tax rates are low, but it's bringing in some good sums of money, and he's not going to do away with it just yet. As a result of the budget, inflation remains between 4 and 5%, and that's a big worry, because inflation should really be around 2 to 3%, so it doesn't trigger off an intervention from the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England. The high interest rate of inflation is the high interest rate should be to stop us from spending on white goods, fridges, cars, Mercedes-Benz. I know they're very popular with Greeks, BMWs and so on. But next Thursday, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England meets, and because of high inflation, around 5%, the record low interest rates, half of 1%, historically low for a whole year, they may go up by 1/4%. Now, 1/4% is not much, but what that says to you and to me and to Andreas and to everyone is that interest rates are on an upward curve. They're on an upward ascent, and that will be worrying. Not too worrying, but it's a message that it sends. So inflation is still very, very worrying. The government is currently borrowing 146 billion, and he wants to get that down to around 29 billion by 2015. And that's the magic year, 2015. 2015 is, as far as I'm concerned, the year when we get back to normality, when perhaps the RBS, NatWest, Lloyds TSB will be back in private hands, when perhaps by then the government will not own a bank. It's not nice for governments to own banks. Governments should not be owning banks. But the banks have been naughty, we all know that. They've overstepped the mark, and they've had to be owned because they couldn't be allowed to fail. And that is just a reality. Whether you disagree with it or not, a bank could not be allowed to fail. Otherwise, the economy would just come to a grinding halt. So there are concerns about the economy. 2015 is my prediction when things will be back to normal, when banks will be lending to small businesses, when banks will be lending to first-time buyers. So it will be a long haul. On other taxes and allowances, council tax has been frozen. None of you should have received an increase in your council tax. If you have, something is wrong, or as a quirk of where you live. For example, in Merton, we have Wimbledon Village conservators, and they're happy. Those people living near Wimbledon Village, very plush area, are happy to pay a bit extra on their council tax. But all council tax throughout the UK has been frozen. Now, one of the things that he did do was to apply a passenger duty for the first time on private jet users, and that has not enamoured Alan Sugar or Stelios Hagianu. They're very angry about that. Sad, isn't it? Help for businesses. This is a good way forward, but obviously worrying for a lot of people who say, hang on a minute, we're all suffering. Why are big companies in particular getting a tax cut? Well, they're getting a tax cut of 2%. So big companies' tax rate will go down from 28p in the pound to 26p in the pound. And then by 2015, again, that magic year, tax for big companies will be 23%. Very, very attractive. This is to encourage companies in France, in Europe, in Germany, to set up in the UK. But there is some concerns that whilst you and I, as persons, as individuals, are paying tax at 20 and 40%, why are large companies paying at 23%? But that is to get growth in the economy. That's to get companies employing people. For smaller businesses, their tax rate will go down to 20p in the pound, and they'll enjoy business rate relief for one more year. And for companies in certain parts of the country, they'll be joined by enterprise zones. And so there's one in London, There'll be one in Croydon, one in the East End of London. I think there'll be one in North London. If you set up a business in an enterprise zone, you won't be paying any business rates. You'll have a business rate holiday. This goes back to the Thatcher years of enterprise zones. Some criticism of that, picking winners and forcing companies to locate for reasons other than good commercial reasons, i.e. tax reasons. And that we'll see how that works. For young people, there'll be 40,000 more apprenticeships and 100,000 more work experience placements with companies, and that's good. For boroughs like the London Borough of Merton and for me, the Chancellor is giving us, all boroughs in the UK, £100 million to repair potholes. I'm sure you'll all agree with that, and you won't spend so much time replacing your tyres. But that, again, is a quirk of a budget to raise news headlines. There will be help for first-time buyers. There'll be a scheme for the first 10,000 first-time buyers where they'll only have to find 5% of the deposit. And so most building societies will put their hand up to go for that scheme. It's got the first buy scheme, and I think it's very important that first-time buyers get back into the system. Now, one of the worries of the economy is that take-home pay is reducing. The average pay now is £20,000 a year in the UK. It should be around £24,000. So the strictures of the economy, the deficit, the concerns, the high unemployment means that the average pay of people has gone down. Add to that the VAT of 20%, and you can see why consumers are edgy in particular about spending, and that is obviously a worry for businesses. There are some organisations that are doing well despite the difficulties. The Cooperative Bank, which is a kind of a mutual bank, has seen its profits jump by 50%. It's not a high street bank. It's done well. It's kept below the radar, and it's now resurfacing as a possible new model of the way banks should behave. Lloyd's of London has seen a fall in its profits, obviously because of the earthquakes in Chile, New Zealand, floods in Australia, BP spills in the Gulf of Mexico and various others. And that is not good for the economy. We all want Lloyd's to be doing well, to be underwriting risk. Without risk, the economy cannot persevere. But I have to agree with PAMPOS. You know, we need to combine economic prosperity, the way in which Andreas Panagiotou has done that, with social justice, so thinking about other people who are less well off than ours. And that's why help for young kids, help for first-time buyers is very, 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 very important, that these two things are combined. Dixon's not doing too well. There's been a 20% plunge on their profits. And again, that's because people are not replenishing their white goods, their fridge, their cookers, their television sets and so on. And again, that normality will probably come back in 2015. One of the quirks of the economy is that advertising in print is going down, but advertising on the internet is going up. And so that's a good tip in terms of looking out for companies that are doing well. So companies that arrange or put in place advertising on the internet will increasingly do much, much better. Now, on Greece, for example, there is an expectation that Greece may default on its loans from the European Central Bank. Interest rates in Greece are 12.5%. Interest rates here are 0.5%. And so that is a worry, along with Portugal, and that'll always worry industry and businesses, because news is now international, and obviously we do want Greece and Portugal and Spain to get on their feet. They're being helped by the euro coming to their support, but it is important that we see improvements there, and countries have to take steps, because countries are rated like you and I are rated. We have a credit rating when we go and hire something or buy something, not in cash, or we go and borrow something. We have a credit rating. My wife's credit rating is very, very low. I know that for a fact. But countries also have a credit rating. Countries have a credit rating. And the irony of it is that that credit rating is done by a company called Moody's. And they are so cheeky. They're going around credit rating countries and saying the UK may reduce its credit rating from AAA, may go down. Then they're looking at other countries, Germany as well. And yet this is this very same credit rating agency, Moody's and Standard & Poor's, that got the credit rating of banks so wrong. Really, really very, very cheeky of them. They need to look at their systems as to how they were not able to assess the banks as the banks were making all those mistakes. And just finally, something for us to bear in mind, there are 40 million high-rate taxpayers in China. That's more high-rate taxpayers than in the UK. 40 million high-rate taxpayers in China. China will overtake America and dominate world trade by 2030. The visa application system is going to be eased for Chinese people, and the Chinese government is now happy with that. So there is that is where the competition is coming from, and that is why I believe that the EU bloc, the European Union and the Euro were crucial, because you cannot compete, and you will not be able to compete on your own against the likes of China, and that will be a push for the UK perhaps to join the Euro eventually. At the moment there is no political support for the UK to join the Euro, but if China carries on the way it is, that'll make it it'll test the pound, that'll make it much, much more difficult. So I'm not a tipster, and shares go up as well as down, as Andreas knows, but I do like Greggs. I like their food. In Wimbledon, there's 2 in a very short space. There's 2 in a very short space in Lower Marsh, in the Cut. They now have 1,400 stores. They combine healthy food with bog standard meat pies and pasties. But there's a lookout for you in terms of a tip. But please, I'm not a tipster, but that company seems to be doing well. And at the end of the day, like all Greeks, we like our fagido. Thank you.
Jets and ships. I looked at opportunity, okay, when I was in the residential for 15, 17 years, and obviously I had the advantage on my side. Banks were giving crazy money, the residential prices were doubling and tripling, and I was on the way by, I couldn't buy enough buildings. We were buying buildings everywhere, developing, carrying on. It was a mad, crazy 15 years. During that period, if you looked at the way, and we go back to the banks, the way finance was easily lent, you saw people start, well not everyone, but a lot of people were successful, everyone wanted their own private jet. Then everyone wants a yacht. These were 2 markets that if you ordered let's say for example, if you ordered a boat, it takes 4 years to build. By the time it's built, you could make easily 40% profit for delivering that boat at that period. And the same was with the jets. So I took advantage and I got involved in the jet business and the yacht and building my own boats, selling, rebuilding and making profit. So eventually, I have to say, I built about 8 boats. I say boats, they were like 200 foot with helicopters and ships. But from the second yacht that I built, the rest of them were built on profit. So I had no money in there anymore. So I could afford to gamble with the profit I was making. And the same thing I was doing on the jets. But it's not always that good, because on the last jet I lost £1 million on the order. So it's not always as proves itself.
I'd like to introduce NEPOMAK UK to some of you. I'm sure some of you are already familiar with us, and link it to what the speakers said a little earlier. NEPOMAK UK is a non-profit organisation run by volunteers aimed at Cypriots between the ages of 18 and 30. Sorry. Our aim is to bring young Cypriots together, promote the Cypriot community, the cause, and do everything to help each other with a Cypriot twist. So to that end, we run a series of social events, we run education programs, we have a distance learning program, we send young Cypriots to Cyprus to learn the culture, we speak to MPs and the like on Cyprus to promote the Cyprus issue and so that it's not forgotten. However, we realise that, with the financial crisis and, difficult situation, that Cypriots want more, and we're moving more towards helping young professionals, Cypriots who are starting out in their careers and, in the early stages. We've set up an online networking group on LinkedIn. So if you search NEPOMAK Global, you'll be able to join that. So you can network with other Cypriots without having met them. The aim of this would be to sort of encourage all Cypriots to go into the group. If they have any questions, they can ask, any of the group members, and they're all willing to sort of share their insights and, help give advice on their companies and their careers. So building onto that, we're sort of doing online face-to-face networking groups, and we're also looking at doing careers fairs and careers advisory for young Cypriots to give advice for those who are unsure about their sort of first path in life. So I like to think that we're on our way to sort of helping the community and letting us help each other. So on that note, thank you very much for coming.